Welcome to Work This Way, a labor and employment podcast. I'm Tina Emerson, here with Maynard Nexsen employment lawyer Jennie Cluverius. Good to see you, Jennie.
Good to see you, Tina.
Well, I'm glad you're here because today we are joined by two other members of Maynard Nexsen's family, Erica Barnes and Christian Dysart, and they help lead the firm's government investigations and white-collar defense practice group. Erica and Christian, thanks for joining us today.
Thanks for having us.
Glad to be here.
Well, we're excited to dive into the intersection of white-collar and employment law issues with you both. And Christian, to start us out, can you share when should employers and human resource professionals call in the white-collar and business crimes lawyers?
Well, the first thing I would say is early, right? So way too often we don't get involved until after a problem has been identified. A lot of times, whether it's employment lawyers or human resources professionals, they have some sort of an employee complaint or employee issue, and so they know that there's something brewing. But it's good to get us involved early because we can help make sure that something that might be a small problem doesn't become a big problem. And really, no matter what comes up, it may be new to you in your firm or for you as an employment lawyer, but it won't be new to us. And so we'll be able to pretty quickly identify whether or not this is something that we need to really raise the alarm. What we're always trying to do is look at things through a little bit different lens. Erica and I and other members of our practice group are regularly in communication with prosecutors at the state and the federal level and investigators with federal and state agencies. And so we're going to look at things through a really different lens than you might just as an employer or human resources professional. And so it gives us a chance to assess really early on, even if you just think that maybe, hey, something doesn't seem right here, it's always a good idea to get us involved early on. A lot of times, if you think that there's been fraud committed or an environmental violation, there are lots of things that fall into our wheelhouse, and we're happy to get involved at an early stage and help identify those problems.
Great. Erica, talk to us about how employers should prepare for and handle whistleblowers and the new incentives for more employees to become one.
Yeah, and so I think it's important to talk about two things before we even talk about the how. Let's talk about the why, right? Because if anybody's watching the news these days, it's changing a mile a minute, right? So within the last year, DOJ particularly has expanded the types of business crimes and issues that people can be whistleblowers on. Right. So we used to really think about that in sort of the SEC space, securities crime space, or the False Claims Act space, oftentimes in the healthcare world. Now, almost any kind of business crime, there is actually an incentive for your employees to turn you in. And by incentive, I mean a monetary incentive, but also an incentive if they are the wrongdoer. Right, they potentially have an incentive to turn in their employer and the broader company in an effort to reduce their own exposure. So that was already going on. And as DOJ has been rolling that out in the last year, we've all been trying to figure out what to do with that. We got the change in the administration and so many of the new executive orders and initiatives that are coming out of that. And what we think that is going to do is there are certain kinds of business crimes that the Department of Justice is going to be focusing fewer resources on. But that doesn't mean that those things are going to go away. And employers are now going to see more employee whistleblowers pursuing those matters on their own, right? So the government may be, for example, reducing the resources that it's focusing on environmental enforcement, but that doesn't mean that employees aren't going to see things that they think are a problem and they're going to choose to bring that forward and work through that themselves. So I think we're going to see more whistleblower activity. So that's kind of point one. And Jennie, I think you asked me sort of what people can do to prepare, right? So the one tip, and this is counterintuitive to so many clients, you want people to report, right? We want people to report in, not out, right? Because if employees report in, right, we can address those issues in a much better way. So companies need to be looking at, do I have a good anonymous means to report? Am I actually training my employees on how to use it? And that means not just, I wrote it in a handbook I gave them 5 years ago, but do I have something posted on the wall? And am I mentioning it regularly in my employee communications, right? And then when they report, are you making sure that they know and understand that you're following up, right? Even if there's no there, right? The employee has to feel like they've been heard. And that's what we're going to do to encourage people to report in, not out, right? Because if people are mad, I've seen it 1,000 times, they're going to tell somebody. And if you don't give them a way to tell you, they're going to run and tell the SEC or the DOJ or the state AG or whomever they feel like will listen. So Jennie, I think that's the biggest thing. We got to make sure that we're encouraging people to report in, not out.
And you mentioned handbooks. Christian, are there reasons for a business crimes lawyer to review a company's policies and procedures and their employee handbook?
Absolutely. And I think the big thing that we're looking for is helping companies reduce risk, right? So we want to make sure that things either are or are not included in a handbook that can help identify those risks and point both employers and employees in the right direction. Erica touched on the issues related to internal versus external reporting, but we want to make sure that that the handbook is set up in such a way that the company can survive, some dust up, right? And dust ups happen from time to time, and so the goal here is to have the handbook set up in such a way, and the policies and procedures of the company set up in such a way that even if some issue arises, it can be handled internally, right? Bring us in, help us identify what the potential issue is, and then we can, figure out how to put it behind you as quickly as possible.
Erica, how can human resources help prepare a company for a government investigation and correspondingly help reduce cost?
Absolutely. So if I'm the defense for the company, right, HR is the offense, right? So what we typically see is investigations cost a lot of money, right? Even again, if they don't have any merit. And the things that frequently cost the most money, shockingly, is just identifying who to talk to and where to find the documents, right? So a company where HR has done an excellent job of maintaining, for example, personnel files and org charts will save companies thousands and thousands of dollars. And I know that sounds like a sort of administrative thing that you wouldn't think would make a difference. But oftentimes, as we've all moved more to electronic means of communication, right? I will ask a company for a personnel file and it'll have 4 pieces of paper in it. And most of what relates to that employee's employment is actually in a variety of electronic systems or in emails or whatever. It's scattered all over the place. And so then we have to track that down. If that file is solid and concrete and tight, I can quickly tell, what is this person's history with the company? What have they made? What positions have they been? Who have they worked for? Right. And org charts are the same way, right? I often spend a lot of time, which means my clients spend a lot of money, just trying to figure out who reported to who when, right? Who am I supposed to go ask about this? Who did Sally work for 2 years ago? And if companies maintain good org charts, as much as a pain in the butt they sometimes are, it actually saves companies a lot of money. And the third thing is email retention and good document hygiene. Again, if companies are doing a really good job of understanding where their docs are and getting rid of things in a timely way based on retention schedules, we can save a lot of money in trying to find the relevant documents we need to sort of convince people that, again, there's no there.
Now, no one ever really expects an employee to embezzle money or commit crimes against the company. And when that does happen, they might be ill prepared to deal with it. How do employers deal with that? I mean, once that's come to their attention, what do they do?
I think this is a time, if you don't mind, I'll jump in. I think this is a time when I think it's really important to get somebody with some government investigation experience involved pretty early on. I've been dealing with an issue right now with a business owner who had an employee embezzle from her, and without looping me in until a later stage, she went to law enforcement, and unfortunately, law enforcement declined to investigate, declined to charge that person. And so now I'm having to unring that bell, right? So this is a situation where, because we have such regular contact, Erica and I and the other members of our team, we're talking to prosecutors and investigators every day. We speak that language. And I think that we have a better chance of getting an audience with decision makers who can help make sure that kind of business crime against the company is handled. The flip side of that, or the other alternative situation, is that I've also, and I know Erica has too, represented countless companies with employees who did something that ran afoul of company policy, right? Whether they were involved in some sort of vehicular homicide, they were, otherwise engaged in some behavior online that was obviously contrary to company policy. And we've got to make sure that by getting us involved early, and advice that we give to our employment lawyers and HR professionals is before you start ringing the bell and singing from the mountain that there's a potential problem, you need to lock down the data, right? You need to lock down the universe to make sure that whatever is there stays there, and that unfortunately loose lips do continue to sink ships. And so it's important to lock down the data, then get us involved so that we can try to establish, whether or not we think that this is the kind of situation that a prosecutor would get involved in, or if it's absolutely the kind of situation where law enforcement is going to get involved because one of your employees has run afoul of the law, we can make sure that the company is shielded from that prosecution, and that we can point the finger at that individual employee as the bad actor and make sure that the business itself doesn't run afoul of the law.
And that's kind of a nice segue into what I wanted to chat with you all about next. And that is, when can a company be held liable for business crimes committed by its employees? And I realize that there can be situations where employees, for example, have information on their computer that if you all aren't called in early, often, there can be the unfortunate situation where those things kind of get spread, and even doing that is a crime. So tell us a little bit about that. When can a company be held liable for business crimes committed by its employees, or other crimes committed by its employees?
Yeah, so I think let's think about it in two boxes, Jenny, the business crimes piece, and then maybe more traditional crimes that our employees are committing at the office, right? So on the business crimes piece, the general rule is that if an employee is acting in the scope of their employment and they're doing the offense for the benefit of the company, right? So again, take an environmental crime, for example, the employee is, bypassing environmental regulations and dumping, for example, to save the company money. Or a competition violation, the employee is getting together with their competitor and attempting to fix prices for the benefit of the company. Or a bribery situation or kickback situation, again, the employee is hiring the client's wife in an attempt to get that business, right? Things like that. So even if the company doesn't direct the activity or condone it, because the employee is doing it for the benefit of the business, even if they may also be doing it for the benefit of themselves, right, in terms of compensation or stock options or other things, the company can potentially be liable, and not just civilly liable, but criminally liable, right? And so, and people don't think about companies being criminally liable, but obviously they are, and it can have meaningful impacts sort of beyond the fines. So the defenses to that are typically for the company to show that that person was a rogue actor, and not only that the company didn't direct it, but that the company took active steps to make sure their employees knew, it's not okay to hire the customer's wife in an attempt to get that business. It's not okay to cut cost in violation of this environmental regulation. So that's sort of the business crimes piece, which is why it's so important to. I see clients all the time. They see an employee do something bad, and they immediately want to sort of run in and report the employee or fire the employee or do some other things. And they don't stop and think about, we need to figure out what the company's exposure here is first, right? And they go and turn an employee in, and then all of a sudden they've got law enforcement in their business in a way that they did not anticipate. And then the secondary box, Jenny, is that sort of the things that I maybe are not business crimes, right? But employees doing at work, right? They're drinking on the job in an employee vehicle, vehicle. They're looking at inappropriate material on an employment computer, those sorts of things. And even though the company wouldn't traditionally be liable for those kinds of things, the company might be dragged in to an investigation in a way that's costly, reputation damaging, and other things. So So I think you have to think about both of those boxes. But the biggest mistake I think clients make is they assume first that if the employee is doing something bad, that's all about the employee. And many times it's not. It's all about the company.
Well, thank you both for your insight today. That is a topic that can really catch some employers off guard. And I'm sure, Jennie, in your practice, you've dealt with a lot of matters like that where clients were just, or the employer actually was just in a way where they needed some real help.
Yes, and we call on Erica and Christian early and often.
And often. Preparation is key. Thank you both for being with us today. We appreciate your time, and we will see you next time on Work This Way.